Welcome to Mana's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box or on the top right card. Volume 13, The Paladin of the Holy Kingdom. Neia drew her bowstring back in one smooth motion. She turned her keen gaze to the target, and she could see the silent white wisps of her exhaled breath, drawn to the edges of her vision by the wind, where it disappeared. Spring was close, but it was still cold. Neia buried the random notions in her mind deep within her, staring at the target in a state of no thought, and then she slowly drew herself back. During the defense of the city, Neia had come to understand that nobody had time to slowly take aim on the battlefield, but right now they were training to improve their accuracy, so quick-fire drills could be left for another time. And then, she released her arrow. The arrow whistled as it soared through the air. It flew in a straight line and hit the target dead center. Phew, Neia exhaled. Of the 10 arrows she had fired, not a single one had been off target. This was an outstanding accuracy rate, but Neia took no joy in it. She could not do it in the past, but right now, Neia could even split the arrow she had just launched. Of course, she would damage the arrow if she did that, so she did not. The reason why she had ended up like this, why she could do something that was previously impossible for her, was because after that battle, she was not just capable of archery, but of harnessing what they called divine power. However, the strange thing was that it was slightly different from the abilities that paladins were said to possess. This was because normally, paladins could only channel their powers through melee weapons, while she could imbue ranged weapons with her powers. While she did not quite understand what that meant, the Sorcerer King had seemed quite interested when he had heard about this. Still, even the Sorcerer King had only said, "It's hard to tell from just that, let me know if other abilities awaken." Applause rang out, and Neia smiled bitterly, because she felt uncomfortable. "Wow, you're amazing, Baraja-chan. Oh yes, it's the first time I've seen anyone who was so good with a bow. Nobody in my village could do that." "Ah, it's true. I used to be a hunter by trade, and I knew a few people in my own right, but none of them had Baraja-chan's skills." The people praising Neia were the same ones sweating in training with her at the archery range. Many of their faces had not been seen on these streets during the defense of the city 3 weeks ago. The reason for that was because people had been rescued from the nearby prison camps, and the city's population rose swiftly as a result. Those with a knack for archery or who had used bows before were drafted into archery units and placed under Neia's command. Normally, people would balk at being made subordinate to a squire girl, especially if some of them were old enough to be her father. However, none of the men and women gathered here protested. The main reason was because nobody dared voice any objections after being subjected to her vicious gaze, and also because they had to acknowledge her skill with the bow. Some of them were even more grateful to Neia after learning that she was the Sorcerer King's squire. There were also some who were afraid she was undead because they had heard that she was the Sorcerer King's squire, but not everyone was like that. In these 3 weeks, the paladins had been sent out to liberate prison camps, but at the same time, the Sorcerer King and Neia had also gone out to attack camps and rescue prisoners. When the Sorcerer King had first broached the subject, there had been a shocking number of objections. However, the Sorcerer King then said, now that the demi-human alliance is short on manpower, they will start to execute the captives if they judge that they lack the ability to run the prison camps, so they must be rescued without delay, and that had convinced Caspin to accept the Sorcerer King's suggestion, and send the 2 of them out. Neia had originally wanted to argue that the Sorcerer King ought to conserve his mana in order to battle Jaldabaoth. However, Neia admired how he acted to protect the people of another country, and felt the justice emanating from him, so she could not bring herself to stop him. And so, Neia and the Sorcerer King had freed many captives and brought them to this city. For this reason, there were people who were happy to serve under Neia. "Ah, I ought to learn a few things from Baraja-chan. Yeah, that's right. She's amazing. Also, that bow you borrowed from the Sorcerer King, the ultimate shooting star super, you can do even more amazing things with that bow, right? The ultimate shooting star super, huh? What an amazing bow." All their eyes went to the bow stowed behind Neia's back, the ultimate shooting star super. She ought to have used it during her training, but she had avoided doing so because she did not want to rely too heavily on her weapon. Yes, during the battle for the city walls, it was thanks to the ultimate shooting star super that I was able to survive until His Majesty arrived. No, that's not it. It wasn't just the ultimate shooting star super, but the armor I borrowed from His Majesty and all his other items that helped me too. Neia caressed Grand King Buser's armor. This armor came from a renowned demi-human. It looks amazing to me, no matter how many times I look at it. I was allowed to touch it once, its hardness is amazing. I chopped at it with a sword, and it just bounced off. Seriously. I've never heard that before. As Neia's war gear became a hot topic, she clapped to get everyone's attention. Alright, enough chit-chat, back to training. According to the Sorcerer King, Jaldabaoth is preparing to make another move soon, so we can't waste a single moment. There was a chorus of acknowledgements. Alright, it's time to begin practical shooting. Let's start, everyone. As she watched her subordinates, the word made her feel like a big shot, and it embarrassed her a little. Disperse. Neia removed the item which covered half her face. It was an item she had borrowed from the Sorcerer King. This magic item was a visor-shaped set of mirror shades that allowed her to use a special ability known as the Serpent Shot once every 3 minutes. It was a technique that allowed an arrow to twist and turn in front of one's opponent, pouncing them like an animal bringing down its prey. She was not too sure what it did because she had not fired it at anyone, but in all likelihood, one would need to be very agile to avoid it. It was a very handy item for someone like Neia, who used the bow as her main weapon, but more importantly, the fact that it hit her eyes was amazing. Or rather, without that item, she could not have gotten along so well with the others. Neia put her visor on once more, and took up her bow again. Everyone here was experienced, and now that time was tight, she did not need to instruct them on the finer points of finger positioning. She had touched briefly on how to fire quickly, and after that all that was needed was to give them individual coaching, and have them practice until their fingers ached. The most important thing for them was to accumulate shooting experience. As usual, Neia wondered about requesting healing magic from the priests as she loosed an arrow. Just at that moment, Neia's keen ears picked up a noise. It had come from the outside. While Neia's shooting form nearly broke down, she managed to keep it together. It might not have been what she expected, and even if it was the person she had hoped to meet, they might have only been passing by, and not intended to come here. However, the being that appeared at the door to the training yard was the Great King with the skeletal face, the Sorcerer King. In the beginning, everyone had feared the undead, but many of them had been rescued by the Sorcerer King during the defense of the city and from the prison camps. The clamor of respectful and thankful voices soon came to herald the arrival of the Sorcerer King. However, nobody stopped practicing. Normally, they would have knelt before the Sorcerer King when he appeared, but the Sorcerer King himself had put a stop to it. This isn't a public place, so you don't need to do that when I'm just looking in on you, am I wrong? No king, especially one who was a nation-saving hero, should have been treated that way. Even so, the Sorcerer King had said that they did not need to do so. What an amazing person he is. After sighing in awe, Neia went to the Sorcerer King's side, and tightly shut her open mouth. She kept her visor on. The Sorcerer King had said that she did not need to take it off, since she ought to be ready to fight at any time. He was probably concerned about whether she could use a magic item like it was part of her own body, and thinking that she ought to be on guard, no matter what unexpected things happened. Neia was deeply impressed by the depth of the Sorcerer King's considerations. Neia understood that the Sorcerer King's eyes had gone from looking into his hands to herself as she ran over. For some reason, observing the Sorcerer King's habitual movements made Neia a little happy. The thought that she understood the tiny quirks of an extraordinary individual made Neia's cheeks relax. Your Majesty, we are grateful that you have chosen to visit a place like this in person. Neia was still the Sorcerer King's squire, even after being appointed the commander of the archery unit. That said, it was hard to say that she had done a squire's job properly when she had left his side to train others in archery, not to mention she had even made him come here instead. Neia wanted to prioritize her work as the Sorcerer King's squire, but instead she had chosen to do this because she no longer wanted to be a burden to him. And there was also another reason, which she had not told anyone else. That was because the Sorcerer King refused to have anyone except Neia serve as his follower. He had said that to Caspian's face with Neia in attendance. The number of people here was steadily increasing. There were many more skillful or charming people than this mad-eyed maiden. Even so, he had said that Neia would be fine. The person she viewed as justice had said that about her. Could anything have made her happier? Yumu. Well, I know you're being humble. I don't think this is a mere place like this. After all, it is where you sharpen your fangs, is it not? Thank you very much, Your Majesty. She looked around. Perhaps it would be disrespectful to look away from the Sorcerer King, but the visor she wore made it possible and saw that her people had heard it, and the tips of their ears were turning red. The problem was that their performance deteriorated, possibly because they were nervous, or because they had stiffened up their shoulders in order to look good for the Sorcerer King. That said, her own ears felt a little hot too. Miss Baraja, you men have made a great deal of progress since last time. Surely that must be due to your hard work as their leader. His pleasantries both embarrassed Neia and left her at a loss for how to answer. It would be embarrassing to say that they got nervous and can't show their full ability, because Your Majesty arrived. They would think so too. Therefore, Neia decided to take his words as they were given. However, no, it's nothing of the sort. I hardly taught them anything. They could have done that by themselves. Is that so? Well, if you say so, then it must be true. In other words, the Sorcerer King did not think so. Which meant that the Sorcerer King thought very highly of Neia. Neia raised her voice a little to try and hide her desire to skip in delight. In that case, Your Majesty, does your presence here mean that the meetings are over? Ah, yes. They're done for the day, but that said, I did not make any special suggestions. Right now, this city had a mountain of problems, all of which stemmed from the increasing population. The small city of Lloyds had originally been home to less than 20,000 people, but after gathering the people from the liberated camps, there were more than 150,000 people here now. The most recent of these overpopulation problems was the slimes used in the sowers, the sanitary slimes, whose own population had surged due to an abundance in food, and had thus caused a panic when they erupted from the waterways. When the slime population grew, they were typically burned back down with magic items, but the unexpectedly rapid growth meant that this was not done in time, and several men and women had been attacked. When these men and women were surrounded by the slimes, a group of rubbish-clearing monsters called the Filth Eaters appeared from the sowers to help them. Unlike how they appeared, the Filth Eaters were intelligent monsters, and they knew that humans could produce a great deal of their food, and so they saved the people with their acid-resistant bodies. However, the people were not grateful to the Filth Eaters. That was because sanitary slimes were not infectious themselves, but the Filth Eaters who helped them were masses of disease. Thus, the people they had helped had fallen ill and were in a very bad state, particularly those who had contracted encephalitis. In addition, it was winter now, so firewood and other fuels were scarce. Then there was the fact that there had been delays in the construction of housing. While there was no food shortage yet, that would become a danger in the future.